30,000 feet in the air, a little girl's scream pierces through the hum of jet engines. An 8-year-old black child is sobbing, reaching desperately for a worn teddy bear clutched in the hands of a flight attendant who towers over her. The bear, old and loved, with a tiny pilot's cap stitched to its head, dangles like evidence of a crime. The girl's voice cracks as she screams, "That's mine. My daddy gave it to me." Her mother rises from her seat, her voice breaking with a mixture of fury and desperation. "You have no right." But before she can finish, the flight attendant cuts her off, cold and authoritative. "Ma'am, sit down or I'll have you removed from this aircraft." The cabin falls silent except for the little girl's sobs. Passengers pull out their phones. Some record. Some just stare. And in that moment, suspended between earth and sky, a line is crossed that can never be uncrossed. But what nobody on that plane knew, what the flight attendant couldn't possibly understand, was that this wasn't just about a teddy bear. This was about a promise made by a father who would never come home. This was about dignity. This was about a community that was about to rise up in ways no one could predict. And before that plane landed, everything would change. But to understand how we got here, we need to go back. 6 hours earlier. Atlanta, Georgia. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, but the Washington household was already awake. In a modest 2-bedroom apartment on the east side of Atlanta, 8-year-old Amara Washington sat cross-legged on her bedroom floor, carefully packing her backpack for the most important trip of her young life. Her natural hair was styled in 2 perfect puffs, each one taken care of the night before by her mother's patient hands. Amara's dark eyes sparkled with a mixture of excitement and nervousness as she triple-checked her belongings. Spelling flashcards? Check. Lucky pencil set? Check. Competition registration papers? Check. And then there was Captain. Captain was a teddy bear, brown and worn from years of being held, slept with, cried into, and whispered to. His fur was matted in places, one of his button eyes had been resewn 3 times, and his tiny pilot's cap, navy blue with a golden emblem, sat slightly crooked on his head. To anyone else, Captain might have looked like just another old stuffed animal ready for the donation bin. But to Amara Washington, Captain was everything. He was the last piece of her father she could still hold. 3 years ago, when Amara was only 5 years old, her father, Captain Marcus Washington, had knelt down in this very bedroom in his Air Force dress uniform. His medals caught the light, and Amara remembered being mesmerized by how official and important her daddy looked. He'd placed Captain in her small hands and said, "Baby girl, Daddy's got to go away for a while. I'm going to fly planes and help people far away. But I need you to take care of Captain for me. Can you do that?" Amara had nodded, trying to be brave even though she didn't want him to leave. Her father had kissed her forehead and promised, "I'll be back before you know it. And when I come home, we're going to celebrate you winning your first spelling bee. I just know you're going to be a champion." Marcus Washington never came home. His helicopter went down over Afghanistan 7 months into his deployment. Amara was 6 when 2 uniformed officers appeared at their door with folded flags and words her mother could barely hear through her own screaming. 4 months after, Amara wouldn't let go of Captain. She slept with him, ate breakfast with him propped in the chair next to her, brought him to school until the other kids teased her enough that she started leaving him in her backpack. But every night, without fail, she'd whisper to Captain about her day, her dreams, and her father. "Daddy, I learned a new word today. Perseverance. Perseverance. It means not giving up even when things are hard. Just like you taught me." Now, 3 years later, Amara had made it to the National Spelling Bee in Seattle. Out of thousands of kids across the country, she was one of the 250 chosen to compete. It was the dream her father had for her, the one he'd never see come true. And there was no way Amara was getting on that plane without Captain. "Amara, baby, you ready?" Her mother's voice called from the kitchen, tired but warm. Nicole Washington stood at the kitchen counter, pouring coffee into a thermos she'd need for the long day ahead. At 34, Nicole carried the weight of the world on her shoulders, and it showed in the slight slouch of her posture, the dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer could quite hide, and the way her nurse's scrubs seemed to hang on her frame just a bit too loosely. She'd been working double shifts at Grady Memorial Hospital for the past 6 months, picking up every extra hour she could get. The airline tickets to Seattle had cost nearly $800. The hotel for 3 nights? Another $600. The registration fee for the spelling bee, meals, transportation, it all added up to money Nicole didn't have. She'd sold Marcus's record collection last month. That hurt. She'd sold her own engagement ring 3 weeks ago. That hurt more. She'd even asked her mother for help, something she swore she'd never do again after the falling out they'd had at Marcus's funeral. Her mother had said no. Some wounds don't heal, they just scar over. But Nicole Washington would walk through fire before she let her daughter down. Marcus had believed in Amara, had spent countless evenings drilling her on vocabulary words, making up silly songs to help her remember spellings, filling her head with confidence and possibility. "Our baby's going to change the world," he used to say. Nicole wouldn't let his death kill that dream too. Amara appeared in the kitchen doorway, backpack on, Captain Bear tucked securely under her arm. "I'm ready, Mama." Nicole turned and looked at her daughter, really looked at her, and felt her heart squeeze. Amara had Marcus's eyes, his determination, his beautiful spirit. She crossed the small kitchen and knelt down, adjusting the collar of Amara's favorite purple dress. "You know how proud I am of you, right? No matter what happens in Seattle, you've already won. You've worked so hard." "I know, Mama. But I want to win for Real. For Daddy." Nicole pulled her daughter into a tight hug, breathing in the coconut oil scent of her hair. "Your daddy is watching over you. He's always with you." Amara squeezed Captain tighter. "That's why I need Captain with me. So Daddy can be there when I compete." Nicole pulled back, cupping Amara's face in her hands. "Then Captain definitely comes with us. Now let's get going before we miss our flight." They loaded into Nicole's 15-year-old Honda Civic, the check engine light glowing orange like it had been for the past 3 months. Nicole said a silent prayer that the car would make it to the airport and still be there when they got back. She'd deal with the mechanic bills later. Right now, all that mattered was getting Amara to Seattle. The drive to Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport took 40 minutes in early morning traffic. Amara sat in the back seat, going through her flashcards while talking to Captain. "Okay, Captain, here's a hard one. Pulchritudinous. Can you spell it?" She paused as if the bear were answering. "That's right. Pulchritudinous. It means beautiful. Like Mama." Nicole caught her daughter's eye in the rearview mirror and smiled, blinking back tears she didn't have time to shed. At the airport, they checked in, made it through security, and found their gate with 30 minutes to spare. Gate B-17. Flight 47 to Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. Departure time, 9:45 a.m. Nicole had splurged on one thing. She'd made sure they sat together. 2 seats, coach class, row 23. The seats near the back of the plane, but together. That's what mattered. As they waited to board, Amara studied the planes through the massive windows, watching them taxi and take off with wonder in her eyes. "Daddy flew planes bigger than those," she said to Captain, holding him up so he could see too. "He was the best pilot in the whole Air Force. That's what Mama says." Nicole watched her daughter, this resilient, brilliant, beautiful child who'd survived grief that would break most adults. Amara had been in therapy for 2 years after Marcus died. There were still nightmares. There were still days when she cried for her daddy. But she kept going. She kept studying. She kept believing. If that wasn't strength, Nicole didn't know what was. Flight 47 to Seattle, now boarding all passengers. Nicole grabbed their carry-on bag, Amara clutched Captain, and they joined the line shuffling toward the jet bridge. As they handed their boarding passes to the gate agent, Nicole felt a flutter of anxiety in her chest. She'd been feeling it all morning, this low-level dread she couldn't quite name. Maybe it was just the stress of flying, of spending money she didn't have, of putting all her hopes into a spelling bee competition. Or maybe it was something else. Some maternal instinct that sensed danger ahead. They walked down the jet bridge, the sound of their footsteps echoing off the walls. The plane came into view and Amara squeezed Captain a little tighter. "We're going to fly just like Daddy," she whispered. The plane was a Boeing 737, worn but functional. As they stepped through the aircraft door, they were greeted by a flight attendant standing near the cockpit. She was a white woman mid-40s with blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her name tag read, Denise Carmichael, Senior Flight Attendant. She'd been with the airline for 15 years and she wore that tenure like armor. Denise Carmichael had started her morning like any other. She'd woken up alone in her apartment, made coffee she barely tasted, and driven to the airport while arguing with her soon-to-be ex-husband over text about custody arrangements for their adult children who barely spoke to her anymore. She was tired. Bone tired. The kind of tired that comes from working a job you used to love but now just endure. She'd been passed over for a promotion to lead flight attendant 6 months ago. They'd given it to Rebecca, 28 years old with half Denise's experience. The official reason was cultural fit and customer service scores, but Denise knew the real reason. She was too old, too set in her ways, not bubbly enough for the airline's new brand image. So Denise showed up, did her job and went home. And somewhere along the way, without even realizing it, she'd stopped seeing passengers as people and started seeing them as problems to be managed, rules to be enforced, chaos to be controlled. She'd grown up in a small town in rural Pennsylvania where everyone looked like her, thought like her, lived like her. She'd absorbed lessons she didn't even know she was learning, biases that felt like common sense, prejudices that masqueraded as preferences. And now, 15 years into this career, those unexamined beliefs had calcified into reflexes she no longer questioned. When Nicole and Amara approached, Denise's smile remained fixed in place, but something flickered in her eyes. A judgment. A calculation. She looked at Nicole's worn sneakers, at Amara's discount store dress, at the teddy bear clutched in the child's arms. Her gaze lingered just a fraction of a second too long. "Welcome aboard," Denise said, her voice bright but hollow. "Your seats are toward the back. Row 23. "Thank you," Nicole replied, ushering Amara down the narrow aisle. As they passed, Denise's eyes followed the teddy bear. She noted its worn condition, its size, the way it would take up space on the child's lap. She made a mental note. That would need to be dealt with. Regulations after all. Standards had to be maintained. Nicole and Amara made their way down the aisle, past rows of passengers already settled in, already absorbed in their phones and books and sleep masks. They found row 23, 2 seats on the right side of the plane, window and middle seat. Nicole let Amara have the window. "Look, Captain, you can see the wing." Amara positioned the bear by the window, his face pressed to the plexiglass. As Nicole helped Amara buckle in and stowed their bag in the overhead compartment, she noticed the other passengers around them. Directly across the aisle in row 23 seat C sat an elderly Asian man, Mr. David Chin, 72 years old, traveling to Seattle to visit his granddaughter's college graduation. He wore a cardigan despite the warmth and carried a newspaper he'd already read twice. He noticed the little girl with the teddy bear and smiled warmly. It reminded him of his own granddaughter at that age. Mr. Chin had immigrated to the United States from Taiwan 50 years ago with nothing but a suitcase and a dream. He'd built a chain of toy stores across the Pacific Northwest, raised 3 children, and never forgot what it felt like to be dismissed, underestimated, treated as less than. He saw things others missed because he'd lived through things others would never understand. In row 24, a young couple, Jake and Sarah Morrison, were on their way to Seattle for a friend's wedding. They were in their late 20s, idealistic, the kind of people who shared activist posts on social media and meant well even when they didn't always know how to help. Jake had his laptop out already, working on a presentation. Sarah was scrolling through wedding Pinterest boards. They were good people, the kind who genuinely believed in justice and equality, but who'd never really been tested on those beliefs in any meaningful way. And in row 22 seat A, there was Mr. Gerald Patterson, a corporate attorney from Chicago, 56 years old, returning home from depositions in Atlanta. He wore an expensive suit and the kind of watch that cost more than Nicole made in 3 months. He'd spent 30 years representing corporations in discrimination cases, and he'd seen every tactic, every loophole, every way powerful institutions protected themselves. He'd noticed the mother and daughter, but only in passing. He had briefs to review. The plane continued to fill. Passengers shuffled to their seats, stuffed bags into overhead bins, argued quietly about armrest territory. Normal pre-flight chaos. And then came Tracy Martinez, the junior flight attendant who'd been assigned to work this flight with Denise. Tracy was 26, Latina, and had only been with the airline for 18 months. She loved her job, loved traveling, loved meeting people from all walks of life. But working with Denise was always a challenge. There was something about the older woman's demeanor, the way she treated certain passengers differently than others, that made Tracy deeply uncomfortable. She'd thought about reporting it, but Denise had seniority, connections, and Tracy was still on probation. So Tracy did what most people do when confronted with injustice in the workplace. She stayed quiet and hoped someone else would say something first. Denise Carmichael made her way down the aisle, performing her pre-flight checks with mechanical efficiency. She paused at row 23, her eyes landing on Amara and Captain Bear. The bear was on Amara's lap, under the seatbelt with her. "Sweetie," Denise said, her voice saccharine, "you're going to need to put that away. It's taking up too much space." Amara looked up, confused. "But I'm holding him. He's not in the way." Nicole immediately tensed. She leaned forward slightly, keeping her voice calm and respectful. "She's holding it. It's not blocking anything or in anyone's way." Denise's smile tightened. "Ma'am, I'll need you to comply with crew instructions. Personal items should be stowed during taxi and takeoff." Nicole glanced around the cabin. In row 19, a white child, maybe 6 years old, had a stuffed unicorn on her lap. In row 15, a toddler clutched a blanket. In row 12, a businessman had his briefcase at his feet, clearly not stowed. No one was bothering them. Nicole's jaw clenched, but she kept her composure. She'd learned long ago that arguing with authority as a black woman was a dangerous game. You had to pick your battles carefully. One wrong word, one perceived attitude, and suddenly you're the angry black woman, the problem passenger, the one who gets escorted off the plane in handcuffs while your child watches and learns that the world will never give you the benefit of the doubt. Amara can keep it on her lap, under the seat belt, Nicole said firmly but without raising her voice. It's secure and not violating any regulation I'm aware of. Denise's expression shifted, her professionalism cracking just enough to reveal the coldness underneath. Ma'am, I'm informing you of the policy. If you refuse to comply, we'll have a problem. Mr. Chin across the aisle lowered his newspaper, watching the exchange with a frown. He'd seen this before. The selective enforcement of rules. The way authority bends differently depending on who's being judged. Nicole felt her daughter's hand slip into hers, felt the tremor of anxiety in Amara's grip. She wanted to fight. She wanted to stand up and call out the obvious double standard, wanted to point to every other child on this plane holding something, wanted to demand Denise's supervisor, wanted to protect her daughter from learning this lesson so young. But she also wanted to get to Seattle. She wanted Amara to compete. She couldn't risk getting kicked off this flight. There was no money for another ticket. This was it. Fine, Nicole said quietly, the word tasting like surrender. She turned to Amara and her voice was gentler now, softer, breaking just a little. Baby, let's put Captain under the seat for now. Just until we're in the air. Then you can hold him again, okay? Amara's eyes filled with tears. But Mama. I know, sweet girl. I know. But we need to get to Seattle so you can spell your heart out and make Daddy proud, right? Remember what Daddy always said? Choose your battles. This isn't our battle. Not yet. Amara nodded miserably and bent down, carefully placing Captain on the floor under the seat in front of her. She kept one hand down, touching his paw, maintaining contact like a lifeline. Denise watched this with satisfaction, then continued down the aisle without another word. Nicole sat back in her seat, her heart pounding, her hands shaking slightly with suppressed rage and helplessness. That familiar feeling, the one black parents know too well, washed over her. The feeling of having to teach your child in real time that the world will not always treat them fairly. That their skin will determine how they're seen, how they're judged, what they're allowed. That sometimes survival means swallowing your pride, bending when you want to stand, being smaller than you are just to make it through the day. And the worst part? Knowing that every time you do it, every time you teach them to comply, to not make waves, to accept the unacceptable, you're preparing them for a lifetime of these moments. A lifetime of being asked to shrink. Mr. Chin caught Nicole's eye and gave her a small nod of solidarity. He'd seen what just happened. He understood. 50 years in this country had taught him to recognize injustice even when it wore a smile and a name tag. Tracy, the junior flight attendant, had witnessed the exchange from the galley. Her stomach twisted with discomfort. She'd seen Denise do this before, seen her target certain passengers while letting others slide. But what could Tracy do? She was nobody, just a junior attendant, and Denise was senior staff. If Tracy spoke up, she'd be the one in trouble, not Denise. That's how these systems work. They protect themselves. The plane pushed back from the gate. The engines roared to life. And as Flight 47 began to taxi toward the runway, the captain's voice came over the intercom, professional and calm, welcoming them aboard, promising a smooth flight, estimating arrival time in Seattle at just after 1 p.m. local time. None of them knew that this would be anything but smooth. That before this plane landed, that teddy bear would become the center of a confrontation that would be seen by millions. That a child's tears would spark a movement. That ordinary people would be forced to decide whether to speak up or stay silent. The plane accelerated down the runway, pressing everyone back into their seats with the force of takeoff. Amara squeezed her eyes shut, her hand still reaching down to touch Captain's paw. And then they were airborne, Atlanta falling away beneath them, climbing into clouds that looked like cotton, heading west toward whatever was waiting for them in Seattle. Once the seatbelt sign dinged off, Amara immediately reached down and pulled Captain back onto her lap. She buckled him in with her, under the seatbelt, exactly as her mother had said. Nicole watched Denise move about the cabin, helping passengers with overhead bins, preparing for the beverage service, and she prayed that would be the end of it. Let them just get through this flight. Let them get to Seattle. Let Amara compete and come home and never think about this plane ride again. but Nicole's prayers went unanswered. About 20 minutes into the flight, Denise began the beverage service, pushing her cart down the aisle with Tracy following behind. The routine was simple. Ask each passenger what they'd like to drink, pour it, hand it over, move to the next row. When they reached row 23, Denise stopped in front of Amara with that same fixed smile. "And what would you like to drink, sweetie?" Amara looked up at her with those big, trusting eyes. "May I have apple juice, please?" "We're out of apple juice," Denise replied without even checking her cart. Nicole glanced at the cart. There were at least 4 cans of apple juice visible. She opened her mouth to say something, then closed it. "Pick your battles. Don't make a scene. Get to Seattle." "Then may I have orange juice?" Amara asked, her voice smaller now. "We're low on that too. How about water or soda?" "Water is fine. Thank you." Denise poured a cup of water, handed it to Amara with a tight smile, then moved on. But 3 rows up, when she reached the young white girl in row 19, the one with the stuffed unicorn, Nicole heard Denise ask the same question. "And what would you like, sweetheart?" "Apple juice, please." "Of course. Here you go." Denise pulled out a can of apple juice, poured it into a cup with ice, even added a straw and handed it over with a genuine smile. Nicole's hands gripped the armrests so hard her knuckles went pale. Amara had seen it too. Her daughter looked at her with confusion and hurt written all over her face. "Mama, why did that girl get apple juice? The lady said they didn't have any." Nicole's heart shattered. How do you explain this? How do you tell your 8-year-old daughter that some people will treat her as less than because of the color of her skin? That some people will lie to her face, deny her small kindnesses, make her feel unwelcome in spaces she has every right to occupy? How do you explain that without destroying her innocence, without filling her with the kind of anger and pain that could poison her childhood? "Sometimes, baby," Nicole said carefully, her voice barely above a whisper, "sometimes people make mistakes. Sometimes they don't see things clearly. But we don't let that change who we are. We stay kind. We stay focused. We remember what matters." It was the answer of a mother who'd been navigating racism her entire life, who'd learned to protect her child by teaching her to expect less, to not make waves, to survive by being twice as good for half the recognition. But even as Nicole said it, she felt sick. Because she didn't want this for Amara. She didn't want her daughter to learn to make herself smaller, to expect less, to accept injustice as just the way things are. Amara turned away and looked out the window, holding Captain tighter. She whispered to the bear, too quiet for anyone else to hear, "Daddy, I don't think that lady likes me." Mr. Chin, who'd witnessed the entire exchange, leaned across the aisle. He spoke softly, kindly. "Miss, I saw what happened. That wasn't right. That wasn't a mistake." Nicole met his eyes, and in that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. The understanding of people who know what it means to be othered, to be treated as foreign in the country where they were born or the country they've called home for decades. "Thank you," Nicole said quietly. Jake and Sarah, the young couple in row 24, had noticed too. Sarah leaned forward and whispered to Jake, "Did you see that? That was messed up." Jake nodded but didn't say anything. What could they say? They were uncomfortable, they recognized the injustice, but neither of them knew how to address it. So they did what most people do. They exchanged meaningful looks with each other, felt bad about it, and then returned to their own activities, hoping someone else would deal with it. The flight continued. An hour passed. The plane cut through clouds at 35,000 feet. Amara studied her flashcards, quizzing herself quietly, trying to focus on the spelling bee, trying to push away the sick feeling in her stomach. Nicole sat rigid, hyper-aware of every movement Denise made, every time she passed their row, every glance she threw their way. Then came the moment that would change everything. Turbulence hit suddenly, the kind that makes the plane drop just enough to make your stomach lurch. The seatbelt sign dinged on, and the captain's voice came over the intercom asking everyone to remain seated. Amara grabbed Captain and held him tight, her eyes squeezed shut. She was scared of turbulence, had been ever since she was old enough to understand that her father's helicopter had gone down, that flying could be dangerous, that the sky could take people away and never give them back. Nicole wrapped her arm around her daughter. "It's okay, baby. It's just a little bump. Remember what Daddy used to say. The plane is strong. The pilots are trained. We're safe." To distract Amara, Nicole pulled out her phone, making sure it was still in airplane mode, and opened her photos. She scrolled to one of her favorites, a picture taken 4 years ago before the deployment, before the world fell apart. Captain Marcus Washington stood in his Air Force dress uniform, medals gleaming on his chest, his arm around Nicole, little Amara perched on his shoulders, all of them laughing. He looked so alive in that photo. So proud. So full of promise and future. "Look, baby," Nicole said softly, angling the phone so Amara could see. "Remember this day? We went to the Air Force Base for Daddy's promotion ceremony. He was so proud. And look at you up on his shoulders like you were flying." Amara opened her eyes and looked at the photo. A small smile appeared through her tears. "I remember. Daddy let me wear his cap. It was too big and kept falling over my eyes." "That's right. And you know what he said that day? He said, 'One day my baby girl is going to fly higher than I ever did. She's going to do amazing things.' He believed in you so much, Amara. So much." Mother and daughter sat there looking at the phone, remembering the man who'd loved them and left them and never meant to do either. They didn't notice Denise approaching until she was right there, looming over their row. Personal electronics must be in airplane mode during turbulence. Her voice was sharp, authoritative, cutting through the moment like a knife. Nicole looked up, startled. "It is in airplane mode. I'm just showing my daughter a photo to calm her down. She's scared. I need to verify that." Before Nicole could respond, Denise reached down and snatched the phone from her hand. The entire row went silent. Nicole stood up as much as the seatbelt would allow, her voice shaking with barely controlled fury. "You do not have the right to take my phone. Give it back. Now." Denise glanced at the phone screen, saw the photo of the uniformed black man with medals and the smiling family, and something flickered across her face. Was it recognition? Discomfort? Shame? Whatever it was brief. She handed the phone back without a word and walked away. Nicole was shaking now, adrenaline and anger coursing through her. "You had no right to touch my property." Denise didn't respond, just continued down the aisle as if nothing had happened. Mr. Chin was on his feet now despite the turbulence. "Excuse me, miss? I witnessed that entire interaction. What you just did was completely uncalled for and frankly illegal. You assaulted that woman by taking her property." Denise spun around, her professional mask slipping further. "Sir, I need you to sit down. We're experiencing turbulence. I'll sit down when you apologize to this mother and her child for your behavior. Sir, sit down now or I'll have you restrained." The cabin was fully alert now. Passengers were watching, some recording on their phones, some just staring in disbelief. The turbulence had passed but the tension remained, thick and suffocating. Mr. Chin sat down slowly, never breaking eye contact with Denise. "I'm an attorney," he said quietly. "And I know discrimination when I see it." Actually, Mr. Chin wasn't an attorney. He was a toy store owner. But he'd learned long ago that sometimes the truth is less effective than a well-placed bluff. And right now, he wanted Denise to think twice before she escalated this situation further. Denise walked back to the galley, her face flushed, her hands trembling slightly. Tracy was waiting for her there. "Denise, what are you doing?" Tracy whispered urgently. "You can't treat passengers like that. You can't just take someone's phone." "I was enforcing regulations," Denise snapped. "Something you'd understand if you had more experience. That's not regulations, that's harassment. And you know it? I've watched you target that mother and daughter since they boarded." "What? What did they do to you?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. And if you don't stop, I'm going to have to report this." "I don't want to, Denise. But I can't be complicit in this." Denise stared at the younger flight attendant, seeing perhaps for the first time that her behavior had consequences, that people were watching, that she wasn't protected by her seniority as much as she thought. But instead of backing down, she doubled down. Because that's what people do when they're confronted with their own prejudice. They defend it. They justify it. They convince themselves they're the victim. "Report whatever you want," Denise said coldly. "I'm doing my job. If that family has a problem with how I enforce regulations, maybe they shouldn't be flying." Tracy stepped back, shocked by the mask-off moment, the admission of what this had always been about. Back in row 23, Nicole was trying to calm Amara down, trying to soothe herself down, trying to figure out how they were going to make it through the next 2 hours of this flight. Amara had stopped looking at flashcards. She just held Captain and stared out the window, retreating into herself the way children do when the world becomes too much to process. Around them, other passengers were reacting in different ways. Some were visibly uncomfortable but stayed silent, not wanting to get involved. Jake and Sarah were whispering to each other, debating whether they should say something, whether it would help or make things worse. Mr. Patterson, the corporate attorney in row 22, had put away his briefs and was now watching Denise's every move, taking mental notes the way lawyers do when they sense litigation on the horizon. And Mr. Chin sat with his newspaper folded in his lap, no longer pretending to read, just observing everything with the careful attention of someone who knows that witnessing is sometimes the most important thing you can do. The flight attendant call button dinged from somewhere in first class, and Denise left to attend to it, finally giving row 23 some space to breathe. Nicole leaned over and kissed the top of Amara's head. "I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry you have to go through this." "It's okay, Mama. You told me the world isn't always fair. I just didn't know it would be this unfair." The wisdom in those words, coming from an 8-year-old child, from a little girl who should be worried about spelling words and making friends and what snacks they'd have at the competition, broke something in Nicole. She turned her face to the window so Amara wouldn't see her crying. But her shoulders shook and Amara knew anyway. Children always know. "Mama, don't cry. Please don't cry. I'm okay. See, Captain and I are okay." Nicole pulled herself together, wiped her eyes and squeezed her daughter's hand. "You're the strongest person I know. You know that? Stronger than me. Stronger than your daddy even. And he was the strongest man I ever knew." They sat in silence for a while, mother and daughter, holding hands across the space where grief and injustice lived, where love tried its best to be enough protection against a world that refused to be gentle. An hour passed. Then another. The plane flew west, chasing the sun, crossing time zones. Passengers dozed, read, watched movies on tiny screens. The cabin settled into the strange liminal space that flights create, suspended between destinations, between the life you left and the life you're heading toward. Nicole felt herself starting to relax despite everything. Maybe that was it. Maybe they'd make it the rest of the way without incident. Maybe they could just get to Seattle, check into their budget hotel, let Amara rest and wake up tomorrow ready for the spelling bee. Maybe this nightmare of a flight would just be a story they'd tell someday, a terrible memory that would fade with time. She should have known better. She should have known that people like Denise don't just let things go. That when someone shows you who they are, when they reveal their prejudice and their cruelty, they rarely stop there. They escalate. They double down. They prove again and again that your humanity is not something they're willing to recognize. Nicole dozed off, exhausted from the emotional toll of the day, from the double shifts before the trip, from the 3 years of carrying grief and responsibility alone. Just a few minutes of rest, that's all she needed. Amara had fallen asleep too, her head against the window, Captain tucked under her arm the way he'd been every night for 3 years. And that's when Denise struck. She'd been waiting, watching, looking for an opportunity. And now, with both mother and daughter asleep, she saw her chance. Denise approached row 23 with Tracy reluctantly following behind. She'd insisted Tracy come with her as a witness, had framed it as a safety issue, had convinced the younger flight attendant that she was just doing her job, following protocol, maintaining standards. But Tracy knew better. Her stomach churned as she followed Denise down the aisle. She knew what was about to happen was wrong. She knew she should stop it. But she was 26 years old, barely out of training, still on probation, scared of losing her job, scared of standing up to authority, scared of being the one who made waves. So she followed, hating herself a little bit with every step. Denise stopped at row 23 and looked down at the sleeping child, at the teddy bear tucked under her arm. She leaned down and, without warning, without announcement, yanked Captain from Amara's arms. Amara jolted awake with a scream that tore through the cabin like a siren. "No, Captain. Give him back." Nicole snapped awake, her mother's instinct firing before her conscious mind even registered what was happening. She saw Denise backing away with Captain in her hands, saw her daughter reaching, crying, hyperventilating. Nicole unbuckled her seatbelt and shot to her feet. "What are you doing? Give that back right now." The entire cabin erupted. Passengers stood up, craning their necks to see what was happening. Phones came out, recording from every angle. People started shouting. Denise held the teddy bear against her chest like a shield. "This is unsanitary and violates multiple safety regulations. I'm confiscating it for the remainder of the flight." "The hell you are." Nicole's voice, usually so controlled, so measured, cracked with raw fury. Her father died serving this country. He gave her that bear before he deployed. "You give it back right now or I swear to God." The cabin went silent. You could hear the hum of the engines, the rush of air outside, and nothing else. Denise froze, the bear still in her hands. Around them, passengers absorbed what Nicole had just said. A fallen soldier. A dead father. A little girl's last connection to him. And this flight attendant had just ripped it away like it was garbage. Mr. Chin was on his feet immediately. "Young lady, you give that child her bear this instant." Jake, the young husband from row 24, stood up too, his phone out and recording. "This is insane. I'm documenting everything. You can't do this." Sarah was crying now, her hand over her mouth. Give her back the bear. Oh my God, just give it back. Mr. Patterson, the attorney, stood and spoke with the calm authority of someone who'd been in courtrooms for 3 decades. Ma'am, what you've just done constitutes assault and battery on a minor, theft of personal property, and violation of this family's civil rights. If you don't return that bear immediately, I guarantee you'll be facing both criminal and civil litigation. Denise looked around at the cabin, at the wall of phones recording her, at the passengers all standing in solidarity with this black woman and her daughter, at the situation spinning completely out of her control. For the first time, she seemed to realize the magnitude of what she'd done. But instead of backing down, instead of apologizing, instead of simply returning the bear and walking away, her pride kicked in. Her ego. Her need to maintain authority and save face and prove that she was right and they were wrong. I'm calling the captain, she said, her voice shaking now. This passenger is creating a disturbance. I'm creating a disturbance? Nicole's voice was dangerous now, low and controlled, the voice of a woman who'd reached her limit. You just assaulted my child. You stole her property. You've been harassing us since we boarded this plane. And you think I'm the problem? Amara was sobbing, reaching for the bear, crying out for her daddy. Please, please give him back. My daddy. I need my daddy. The sound of a child in that much distress is unbearable. It cuts through everything, politics, prejudice, personal comfort zones. It reaches into the human heart and demands a response. And in that moment, every passenger on that plane made a choice about who they were going to be. Tracy, the junior flight attendant, finally found her voice. She stepped forward and placed her hand on Denise's arm. Give the bear back. Please. This has gone too far. Denise shook her off. Get your hand off me. I'm senior staff. You don't tell me what to do. Then I'm going to the captain myself. Tracy turned and walked toward the cockpit, her hands shaking but her decision made. She was done being complicit. She was done choosing her job over her conscience. Denise, realizing she was losing control of the situation entirely, clutched the bear tighter and followed Tracy toward the front of the plane. Fine. We'll let the captain decide who's in the wrong here. She had to push past Mr. Chen to get to the aisle. He didn't move at first, just stood there blocking her path, this elderly man who'd seen injustice his whole life and had finally decided that this was the moment to stop accommodating it. You should be ashamed of yourself, he said quietly. Truly ashamed. Denise pushed past him without responding and made her way to the cockpit, the teddy bear still in her hands, a symbol now of everything that was wrong with how power works, how it protects itself, how it refuses to admit when it's crossed a line. Nicole wanted to follow her, wanted to chase her down that aisle and rip Captain out of her hands. But Mr. Patterson, the attorney, put a gentle hand on her shoulder. Let the captain handle it. You stay here with your daughter. If you chase her down, she'll claim you threatened her, and then you're the one in trouble. Stay calm. Document everything. I'm right here and I'll testify to every single thing that happened. Nicole sank back into her seat and pulled Amara into her arms. Her daughter was shaking, crying so hard she could barely breathe. It's okay, baby. It's okay. I'm going to get Captain back. I promise you. I promise. I want my daddy, Amara sobbed. I want my daddy. Why did that lady take him? Why does she hate us? How do you answer that question? How do you explain to your 8-year-old daughter that sometimes people hate you for no reason other than the color of your skin? That the world will be crueler to her than it is to other children? That she'll have to work twice as hard for half the credit? That she'll be judged by different standards, treated with suspicion and contempt simply for existing? Nicole held her daughter and whispered the only truth she had left. I don't know, baby. I don't know. But I do know this, you are loved. You are worthy. You are brilliant and beautiful and strong. And no one gets to make you feel small. You hear me? No one. Around them, the other passengers were reacting. Mr. Chin had sat back down but was furious, his hands gripping his armrests. Jake was on his phone, typing frantically, posting the video to social media with hashtags and descriptions. Sarah was texting everyone she knew, spreading the word about what was happening on this flight. Mr. Patterson had taken out a legal pad and was writing detailed notes, timestamps, exact quotes, building a case in real time. And then there were the others, the silent majority, the ones who'd watched everything unfold and hadn't said a word. Some looked uncomfortable. Some looked away. Some buried themselves in their books and movies and pretended they hadn't seen anything. Because that's what most people do when confronted with injustice. They bear witness to cruelty and then they choose their own comfort over someone else's dignity. They tell themselves it's not their business, it's not their fight, there's nothing they can do anyway. And in that silence, in that complicity, injustice thrives. In the cockpit, Captain Elena Rodriguez was going through her standard flight checks when Tracy burst through the door, breathless and upset. "Captain, we have a situation in the cabin. Denise has taken a teddy bear from an 8-year-old passenger, and the mother is extremely upset. The entire cabin is in an uproar." Captain Rodriguez looked up from her instruments, her brow furrowed. She took a what from who? Before Tracy could answer, Denise pushed into the cockpit behind her. "Captain, I have a passenger who's been refusing to follow safety protocols since boarding. She became verbally aggressive when I attempted to enforce regulations regarding carry-on items. I've confiscated the item in question for the remainder of the flight." Captain Rodriguez looked at the teddy bear in Denise's hands, then at Tracy's face, then back at Denise. She'd been flying for 20 years. She'd been a captain for 10. She'd seen every kind of passenger issue, every type of cabin drama. And she had a finely tuned sense for when something didn't add up. "You took a stuffed animal from a child?" Her voice was neutral, but there was steel underneath. "It was a safety hazard." "How exactly is a teddy bear a safety hazard?" "It was taking up too much space, it's unsanitary, and the mother was not complying with crew instructions." Captain Rodriguez stood up, her full height impressive even in the cramped cockpit. She was a Latina woman who'd fought her way through a male-dominated industry, who'd faced down discrimination and sexism and people who told her she didn't belong in a pilot's seat. She developed a zero-tolerance policy for bullshit, and right now her bullshit detector was screaming. "Tracy, what actually happened?" Tracy took a breath and told the truth. All of it. The initial targeting at boarding. The denial of juice. The phone incident. And finally, the snatching of the bear from the sleeping child's arms. She laid it out plainly, factually, without editorializing, and let the facts speak for themselves. Captain Rodriguez's jaw tightened with each detail. When Tracy finished, she turned to Denise. "Is this true? I was enforcing regulations." "Is true?" Denise hesitated, realizing she was cornered. "The passenger was not complying." "That's not what I asked." Captain Rodriguez took the teddy bear from Denise's hands and examined it. Worn but clean. Well-loved. A tiny pilot's cap stitched to its head. Something about that cap triggered a memory, faint but persistent, scratching at the edges of her mind. She turned the bear over and saw a name embroidered on the bottom of one foot in neat, careful stitching, Amara Washington. Washington. The memory clicked into place like a key turning in a lock. Captain Rodriguez had served in the Air National Guard before going commercial. She'd done reserve duty, flown transport missions, trained with other pilots from different branches. And she remembered a name, a face, a man who'd been part of a joint training exercise years ago. Captain Marcus Washington. Air Force. Helicopter pilot. Good man. Excellent pilot. They'd kept in touch for a while the way military people do, and then life happened and they drifted apart. But she remembered hearing about his death. She'd been at a reserve meeting when the news came through. A helicopter down in Afghanistan. Everyone aboard lost. She remembered the memorial service, the folded flag, the widow who could barely stand. And she remembered the little girl, maybe 5 years old, wearing a black dress too big for her, holding a teddy bear with a pilot's cap. "What's the child's name?" Captain Rodriguez asked, her voice suddenly different, softer. Tracy answered, "Amara. Amara Washington. Her mother is Nicole Washington." Captain Rodriguez closed her eyes briefly, took a breath, and when she opened them again, there was fire in them. She looked at Denise and spoke with a quiet fury that was somehow more terrifying than shouting. "Do you have any idea what you've done? That child's father was Captain Marcus Washington. He was an Air Force pilot. He died in combat serving this country. That bear is the last thing he gave her before he deployed. And you ripped it out of her arms while she slept because you decided, in your infinite wisdom, that it was unsanitary?" Denise's face went pale. I didn't know." "You didn't know because you didn't bother to ask. You didn't bother to see her as a human being. You saw a black woman and her black child and you decided they were a problem to be managed. Don't try to deny it, Denise. I've seen your personnel file. 4 complaints in 2 years, all from passengers of color. Did you think no one noticed the pattern?" "Captain, I can explain." "No, you can't. There's no explanation that makes this okay. You assaulted a child. You traumatized a family. And you did it because somewhere deep down, you think certain people don't deserve the same respect and dignity as others." Captain Rodriguez held up the teddy bear. "This isn't just a bear. This is a little girl's connection to her father. This is love. This is memory. This is grief. And you threw it away like trash. Denise stood there, unable to speak, the full weight of what she'd done finally crashing down on her. Tracy was crying quietly in the corner. Captain Rodriguez made her decision. You're relieved of duty for the remainder of this flight. Go to the jump seat in the back and sit down. Tracy will handle your section. When we land, you're to report immediately to the crew supervisor. Do you understand? Captain, please? Do you understand? Yes, ma'am. Then go. Denise left the cockpit, her head down, her career effectively over. She knew it. Captain Rodriguez knew it. And in that moment, walking back through the cabin she'd terrorized, past the passengers who'd witnessed her cruelty, Denise Carmichael had to face what she'd become. Had to see herself reflected in the disgusted faces, the recording phones, the little girl still crying in row 23. She made it to the back jump seat and sat down, alone with her thoughts, alone with the consequences of a lifetime of unexamined prejudice, alone with the realization that she'd destroyed whatever goodness had once been in her by choosing fear and hate over empathy and love. Captain Rodriguez grabbed the bear and left the cockpit. She walked down the aisle with purpose, her uniform crisp, her bearing authoritative. Passengers noticed, sat up straighter, whispered to each other. When she reached row 23, she saw Nicole holding Amara, both of them crying, and her heart broke. Mrs. Washington? Her voice was gentle now, all the fury saved for Denise gone, replaced by compassion. Nicole looked up, wary and exhausted. Yes. Captain Rodriguez knelt down in the aisle so she was at eye level with Amara. She held out the teddy bear. I believe this belongs to you. Amara grabbed Captain and clutched him to her chest, sobbing with relief. Captain Rodriguez looked at the bear, at the pilot's cap, at the name embroidered on the foot. Your father gave you this bear, didn't he? Amara nodded, not trusting her voice. What's your daddy's name, sweetheart? Captain Marcus Washington. The name came out in a whisper, sacred and sad. Captain Rodriguez felt tears prick her eyes. I knew your daddy. We flew together once, years ago, during a training exercise. He was one of the best pilots I ever met. And he talked about you constantly. He was so proud of you, told everyone about his smart little girl who loved words and books and was going to change the world someday. Amara's eyes went wide. You knew my daddy? I did. And I was at his memorial service. I saw you there, in that black dress, holding Captain. I remember thinking how brave you were, how strong. Just like your daddy. Nicole was crying openly now, overwhelmed by this unexpected grace, this connection to her husband from a stranger in the sky. Captain Rodriguez stood and addressed Nicole directly. Ma'am, I cannot express how sorry I am for what you and your daughter have endured on this flight. What happened was unacceptable, discriminatory, and cruel. The flight attendant responsible has been relieved of duty and will face serious disciplinary action. I want you to know that this does not represent who we are as an airline or as people. What happened to you was wrong, and I'm going to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else. Nicole found her voice, shaky but grateful. Thank you. Thank you so much. Your husband was a hero. And so are you, raising this beautiful, brilliant child on your own. Marcus would be so proud of both of you. Captain Rodriguez looked at Amara. Where are you headed in Seattle, sweetheart? The National Spelling Bee, Amara said, her voice still small but a spark of pride creeping back in. The National Spelling Bee? That's incredible. Your daddy told me you were smart, but I had no idea you were that smart. For the first time since boarding the plane, Amara smiled. A real smile. Captain Rodriguez pulled a card from her pocket and handed it to Nicole. This is my personal card. My cell number is on the back. If Amara ever wants to visit a cockpit, see what her daddy loved about flying, you call me. Anytime. I mean that. Nicole took the card, holding it like a lifeline. Thank you. We will. I promise. Captain Rodriguez stood and addressed the entire cabin. Her voice carried authority and sincerity. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to apologize for the disturbance and, more importantly, for the unacceptable behavior you witnessed from a member of my crew. What happened to this family was wrong on every level. I've taken immediate action, and I want you all to know that discrimination, harassment, and cruelty have no place in the sky or anywhere else. We're better than that. We have to be better than that. The cabin erupted in applause. Passengers stood, clapping, some wiping tears from their eyes. Mr. Chin nodded in approval. Jake and Sarah were still recording, capturing this moment of accountability and grace. Mr. Patterson stopped taking notes and just clapped, impressed despite his courtroom cynicism. Captain Rodriguez returned to the cockpit, but the energy in the cabin had completely shifted. Passengers who'd been silent before were now approaching Nicole and Amara, offering support, giving contact information, promising to be witnesses if needed. Mr. Chin came over and handed Nicole his business card. I own a chain of toy stores across the Northwest. When you're settled in Seattle, I want you to email me. Captain Bear deserves a friend, and I think I have just the one. On the house. For a little girl brave enough to stand up for what matters. Jake and Sarah showed Nicole their phones. We posted the video. It's already been shared thousands of times. The airline's social media is blowing up. People are demanding justice for you. Mr. Patterson leaned forward from row 22. I'm representing you pro bono if you want to pursue legal action. No fees, no costs. What happened here was discrimination, plain and simple, and I'd be honored to hold them accountable. Nicole was overwhelmed by the sudden outpouring of support, by this community that had formed around her pain, by the realization that she wasn't alone, that people cared, that sometimes the world could surprise you with its goodness even after it had shown you its worst. Amara sat with Captain in her lap, stroking his worn fur, whispering to him. See, Daddy? People are good. Even when bad things happen, people can be good. The rest of the flight was quiet. Peaceful even. Tracy, now in charge of the section, brought Nicole and Amara first-class snacks, extra drinks, anything they needed. She apologized again and again, even though she hadn't been the one to commit the cruelty. But she apologized for her silence, for her complicity, for not standing up sooner. And Nicole, because she understood the complexity of survival and fear and trying to keep your job in a world that doesn't always reward standing up for what's right, forgave her. In the back jump seat, Denise Carmichael sat alone, staring at nothing. For the first time in years, maybe decades, she was confronting the truth about herself. The truth she'd spent so long avoiding, hiding behind professionalism and regulations and the belief that she was just doing her job. But there was no hiding now. Not from the phones that had recorded her, not from the passengers who'd witnessed her cruelty, not from the little girl's screams still echoing in her mind. She thought about her childhood, growing up in a small town where everyone looked like her and thought like her. She thought about her father's casual racism, the jokes at the dinner table, the comments about those people that went unchallenged. She thought about all the times she'd stayed silent when she should have spoken up, all the times she'd looked the other way when someone was mistreated, all the small compromises that had added up over a lifetime until she'd become someone she didn't recognize. She thought about her adult children who barely spoke to her anymore. They tried to tell her, tried to point out her biases, tried to help her see how her words and actions hurt people. But she dismissed them as overly sensitive, too politically correct, brainwashed by liberal culture. And now they were gone, living their lives without her, and she sat alone in an apartment she could barely afford, working a job she hated, pushing away everyone who tried to love her because she'd been too proud, too stubborn, too afraid to admit she was wrong. And now this. The culmination of all those small cruelties, all those unexamined prejudices. A child's teddy bear. A mother's pain. A father's memory desecrated. All because Denise Carmichael couldn't see black people as fully human, couldn't extend to them the same grace and compassion she gave to white passengers without even thinking about it. For the first time in her life, Denise felt the full weight of shame. Real shame. Not the embarrassment of being caught or the fear of consequences, but the soul-deep recognition that she'd caused real harm, that she'd traumatized a child, that she'd become the villain in someone else's story. And there was no undoing it, no taking it back, no making it right. Tracy came back to check on her during a quiet moment. She sat down in the adjacent jump seat and didn't say anything for a while. Finally, you need help, Denise? I know. I'm serious. This isn't just about losing your job. This is about who you are as a person. You need to talk to someone, do some real work on yourself, figure out where all this hate came from. It's not hate. Even now, even after everything, Denise wanted to defend herself. Yes, it is. Maybe you don't use slurs or burn crosses, but what you did to that family. That was hate. Hate dressed up as professionalism. Hate hiding behind regulations. But hate all the same. Denise looked at Tracy, this young woman who'd found her courage when it mattered most, and felt something crack inside her. How do I fix this? How do I fix myself? I don't know. But I know you can't fix it by pretending it didn't happen or making excuses. You start by acknowledging what you did was wrong. Really wrong. And then you do the work to make sure you never do it again. Will you testify against me? When they investigate. Yes, I have to. Not because I want to hurt you, but because I can't be silent anymore. Silence is complicity, and I've been complicit long enough. Denise nodded slowly. She understood. She'd earned this. Every consequence coming her way, she'd earned. The plane began its descent into Seattle. The captain's voice came over the intercom, announcing their approach, thanking passengers for flying with them, wishing them well. Nicole held Amara's hand as they descended through clouds, the city coming into view below, Mount Rainier towering in the distance, snow-capped and majestic. "We made it, baby," Nicole whispered. "We made it to Seattle." Amara pressed her face to the window, Captain clutched in her other hand. "Do you think Daddy can see us? Do you think he knows we made it?" "I think Daddy knows everything. I think he's been with us this whole time, making sure we were okay, making sure we had people around us who cared. All those people who stood up for us? That was Daddy working through them. I wish he could be at the spelling bee. He will be, sweet girl. He'll be there in every word you spell, in every moment of courage you show, in every time you stand up for what's right even when it's hard. That's Daddy. That's his legacy. That's what he gave you." The plane touched down smoothly, tires squealing against the runway, engines reversing, the sensation of arrival after a journey that had been about so much more than miles traveled. As they taxied to the gate, passengers began gathering their belongings, standing up, stretching. But many of them stopped by row 23 to say goodbye to Nicole and Amara, to wish them well, to promise they wouldn't forget. When the plane finally parked and the seatbelt sign dinged off, Captain Rodriguez's voice came over the intercom one more time. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've arrived at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. Before you deplane, I want to personally thank you for your patience and understanding during today's flight. To the young lady in row 23 heading to the National Spelling Bee, you go show them what you're made of. Make your daddy proud. And remember, you're flying higher than any of us ever will." The cabin erupted in applause again. Passengers chanted Amara's name. She blushed and smiled, overwhelmed but happy, feeling for the first time since her father died that maybe the world could be a good place after all. Captain Rodriguez came back into the cabin and personally escorted Nicole and Amara off the plane. She carried their bag, walked them through the jet bridge, and didn't leave their side until they reached baggage claim. She helped them get their suitcase, called them a ride, and before saying goodbye, knelt down one more time to talk to Amara. "You know what your daddy used to say? He said, Elena, flying isn't about defying gravity. It's about finding the courage to rise even when everything is pulling you down. You did that today, sweetheart. You rose. And your daddy would be so, so proud." Amara threw her arms around Captain Rodriguez's neck and hugged her tight. "Thank you for knowing my daddy. Thank you for giving Captain back. Thank you for being brave." When they pulled apart, Captain Rodriguez was crying. So was Nicole. So was half the baggage claim area who'd stopped to watch this moment unfold. "You call me," Captain Rodriguez said to Nicole. "Anytime. I mean it. That little girl is special. Don't let the world make her think otherwise." "I won't. I promise." They said their goodbyes and Nicole and Amara made their way outside where the Seattle air was cool and fresh and smelled like pine and possibility. They got into their rideshare, a quiet driver who didn't ask questions, and headed to their hotel, a budget place near the convention center where the spelling bee would be held. That night, while Nicole worked a shift at a local hospital through a temp agency to earn some extra money, Amara sat in the hotel room with a babysitter the hotel had recommended, studying her flashcards and talking to Captain. The babysitter, a grandmother named Mrs. Chin, the wife of the toy store owner from the plane, insisted on not charging, insisted on bringing dinner, insisted on making sure Amara felt safe and loved. And across the country, the video from the plane was going viral. Millions of views within hours. News outlets picking it up. Social media exploding with outrage and support. The airline's corporate office scrambling to do damage control, to respond to the PR nightmare unfolding in real time. But Nicole and Amara didn't know that yet. They were just focused on getting through the night, getting some sleep and waking up ready for the spelling bee. Ready to honor Marcus Washington's memory by showing the world what his daughter could do. 3 days later, the spelling bee began. Hundreds of kids from across the country, all brilliant, all nervous, all dreaming of victory. Amara wore her favorite purple dress, the same one she'd worn on the plane, and she kept Captain in her backpack backstage. Nicole sat in the audience, her heart in her throat, watching her daughter stand on that stage under bright lights, facing judges and cameras and pressure that would break most adults. Round after round, Amara advanced. Word after word, she spelled correctly. Perseverance, resilience, dignity, justice. Each word a statement, a declaration, a refusal to be broken by what she'd endured. She made it to the final rounds. Top 10, then top 5, then top 3. The crowd was on their feet. The other parents were cheering not just for their own kids but for this little black girl with the worn teddy bear and the story that had captured the nation's heart. Her final word was redemption. Redemption. She spelled it perfectly, then looked up at the judges and said, "That means the action of being saved from sin, error, or evil. Or the act of gaining or regaining something in exchange for payment. But I think it also means that people can change. That even when bad things happen, even when people are cruel, there's always a chance for things to get better. That's redemption too." She didn't win first place. She took third. But the scholarship came through. Full ride to a private school that specialized in gifted education. A chance at a future her father had dreamed of, a future Nicole had worked herself to exhaustion trying to provide. When they announced Amara's placement, Nicole ran onto the stage and swept her daughter into her arms. They cried together, laughing and sobbing at the same time, holding each other the way they had at Marcus's funeral, at Christmas without him, at every moment when the weight of loss threatened to crush them but love kept them standing. Amara clutched her third-place medal and Captain Bear, and she whispered so only her mother could hear, "We did it, Mama. Me and Daddy. We did it." The audience erupted in applause that seemed to go on forever. And somewhere in that crowd, Mr. Chin stood and clapped, and next to him were Jake and Sarah who'd flown back just to watch Amara compete. And in the back, wearing civilian clothes instead of her uniform, Captain Rodriguez stood and clapped with tears streaming down her face. The days after the spelling bee were a whirlwind. The airline issued a public apology and announced policy changes. Mandatory bias training for all staff. A review of all personnel complaints. A victims fund for the Washington family. The CEO himself called Nicole to apologize and offer compensation. She took it. She wasn't too proud to take money that could help her daughter, that could honor her husband's memory by securing Amara's future. Denise Carmichael was fired. Not suspended, not reprimanded, but terminated immediately. The investigation found a pattern of discriminatory behavior going back years, complaints that had been filed and then quietly buried, passengers who'd been mistreated but had no recourse. It all came out. And Denise, facing the possibility of civil rights lawsuits and criminal charges, did the only thing she could do. She enrolled herself in counseling. Not court-ordered, not airline-mandated, but voluntary. Because somewhere in the wreckage of her career and reputation, she'd found a tiny seed of self-awareness. She'd realized that she needed help, that she'd become someone she didn't want to be, and that if she didn't do something about it now, she'd die alone and bitter, hated by her children, despised by strangers, and worst of all, unable to look at herself in the mirror. It was a long road. Therapy revealed childhood trauma she'd never processed, generational prejudice she'd inherited without questioning, a lifetime of fear and insecurity that she'd projected onto people who looked different from her. The work was painful. It forced her to confront ugly truths about herself, to sit with discomfort, to unlearn behaviors that had been reinforced for 45 years. 6 months later, Denise wrote a letter. She addressed it to Nicole and Amara Washington, though she had no idea if they'd even read it. In the letter, she didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't make excuses or try to explain away what she'd done. She simply acknowledged the harm she'd caused, took full responsibility for her actions, and expressed genuine remorse. She told them about the work she was doing, not to absolve herself but to let them know she was trying to be better, to make sure she never hurt anyone else the way she'd hurt them. She ended the letter with a simple statement. "What I did to you and your daughter was unforgivable. I'm not writing this to be forgiven. I'm writing this to say I see you now. I see your humanity, your dignity, your pain. I should have seen it that day. I should have seen it my whole life. I'm sorry I didn't. I'm sorry it took losing everything for me to finally open my eyes. I hope you never think of me again, but if you do, know that you changed me. You made me face who I'd become, and you gave me a chance, however small, to become someone better." Nicole received the letter a week later. She read it alone in her apartment while Amara was at school. She cried. Not because she forgave Denise, not because the words erased the trauma, but because she recognized something honest in them. Something broken trying to heal. She put the letter in a drawer and didn't respond. Maybe she would someday. Maybe she wouldn't. But at least she knew that Denise was trying. That was something. Time passed. Months became a year. Time passed. Months became a year. And then another. Captain Elena Rodriguez received the promotion she'd been working toward her entire career. She became the airline's director of pilot training, overseeing the development of new pilots, shaping the next generation of aviators. But the title wasn't what fulfilled her. What fulfilled her was the program she started on her own time, with her own money at first, until the airline saw the value and funded it properly. She called it Wings of Honor, a mentorship program specifically designed for children of fallen service members who dreamed of careers in aviation. Every summer, kids from across the country came to learn about flying, to sit in cockpits, to hear stories about their parents from people who'd known them, who'd served with them, who remembered them as more than names on memorial walls. Amara Washington was the program's first participant. And every summer after, she returned, not as a student but as a junior mentor, helping younger kids the way she'd been helped, passing on the legacy her father had left behind. Mr. Chin kept his promise too. He sent Captain Bear a friend, a smaller teddy bear wearing a tiny judge's robe, which Amara named Justice. The two bears sat side by side on her bed every night, watching over her dreams. Mr. Chen's toy stores started carrying a special line of teddy bears with pilot caps, proceeds going to military family support organizations. He never forgot the little girl on the plane, and he made sure his grandchildren knew her story, knew that standing up for what's right matters even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's easier to stay silent. Jake and Sarah Morrison, the young couple from Row 24, stayed in touch with Nicole. They'd been changed by what they witnessed, moved from passive allyship to active engagement. They started volunteering at organizations that supported families facing discrimination, showed up at town halls and school board meetings, used their voices in ways they never had before. They sent Amara a card every year on the anniversary of that flight, reminding her that she'd inspired them to be better people. Mr. Patterson, true to his word, represented Nicole pro bono in the civil rights case against the airline. They won. The settlement was substantial, enough to pay off Nicole's debts, enough to set up a college fund for Amara, enough to finally give them some breathing room after years of scraping by. But more important than the money was the precedent. The case became a landmark example of how airlines could be held accountable for discriminatory treatment, cited in law schools and training programs across the industry. Tracy Martinez left the airline 6 months after the incident. She couldn't stomach working for a company that had allowed Denise's behavior to go unchecked for so long, that had buried complaints and protected abusers. She went back to school, got a degree in social work, and now spends her days advocating for victims of workplace discrimination. She never forgot the lesson she learned at 30,000 feet. That silence is a choice, and choosing silence means choosing the side of the oppressor. And Denise Carmichael? Her journey was longer, harder, more painful than she could have imagined. Therapy turned into years of work, peeling back layers of prejudice she hadn't even known existed, confronting the ways fear and ignorance had warped her into someone cruel. She never worked in aviation again. Instead, she took a job at a community center in a diverse neighborhood, working with kids from backgrounds nothing like her own, learning their names and their stories, seeing them as individuals for the first time in her life. It wasn't redemption, she knew she hadn't earned that, might never earn it. But it was a start. A daily practice of becoming someone different, someone better, someone who could look at a little black girl with a teddy bear and see only a child deserving of kindness. She never heard back from Nicole. She didn't expect to. But she kept the letter she'd written in a folder on her desk, a reminder of who she'd been and who she was trying to become. And every day she woke up and made the choice again, to see people, really see them, to extend grace instead of suspicion, to be the person she wished she'd been that day on the plane. 1 year after the spelling bee, on the anniversary of Marcus Washington's death, Nicole and Amara made a pilgrimage they'd been putting off. They drove to Arlington National Cemetery, where Marcus had been laid to rest with full military honors. Nicole had avoided this place since the funeral, unable to face the finality of that white headstone among thousands of others, each one representing a life cut short, a family left behind, a sacrifice most Americans would never truly understand. But Amara had asked to go. She wanted to tell her daddy about everything that had happened. She wanted him to know. They walked through the rows of graves in the golden afternoon light, the grass impossibly green, the silence heavy with reverence. When they found Marcus's headstone, Nicole's legs gave out. She sank to her knees in front of it, pressing her palm against the cold marble, feeling the engraved letters of his name beneath her fingers. Amara stood beside her mother, holding Captain Bear in one hand and her spelling bee medal in the other. She was 10 years old now, taller, her natural hair styled in beautiful twists, her eyes carrying a wisdom that came from growing up too fast but refusing to let that growth make her bitter. "Hi, Daddy," Amara said softly. "I know you probably already know everything because Mama says you're always watching. But I wanted to tell you myself." She told him about the plane. About Denise and Captain Rodriguez and all the people who'd stood up for them. She told him about the spelling bee, about the scholarship, about the new school where teachers actually challenged her instead of underestimating her. She told him about the mentorship program, about the younger kids she helped every summer, about how she was thinking maybe she wanted to be a pilot someday just like him. "I spelled redemption in the finals," she said. "I didn't win first place, but I won something better. I learned that people can change. That even when bad things happen, good can come from it. That standing up for yourself isn't just about you, it's about everyone who comes after you, everyone who might face the same thing." She knelt down and placed the spelling bee medal at the base of the headstone, right next to the small American flag that fluttered in the breeze. "I'm gonna make you proud, Daddy. Every day. I promise." Nicole pulled her daughter close and they stayed there for a long time, crying and laughing and remembering, feeling Marcus's presence in the warm wind and the birdsong and the unshakable knowledge that love doesn't end with death. It transforms, it expands, it becomes something eternal. Before they left, Amara took out her phone and snapped a photo of the headstone with the medal resting against it. She'd keep that photo forever, pull it out whenever she needed strength, whenever the world tried to make her feel small, whenever she forgot who she was and where she came from. 2 years after that day on the plane, Nicole and Amara boarded another flight. Different airline, different route, different everything. They were heading to New York City, where Amara had been invited to speak at a youth leadership conference about her experience, about standing up against discrimination, about finding your voice when the world tries to silence you. As they walked down the jet bridge, Amara felt a familiar flutter of anxiety. Flying still brought back memories of that terrible day, still made her clutch Captain a little tighter. But she'd learned that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's moving forward despite it. They stepped onto the plane and were greeted by a flight attendant standing near the cockpit. She was a black woman, maybe 30 years old, with warm brown eyes and a smile that reached all the way to her soul. Her name tag read Michelle, and when she saw Amara clutching the worn teddy bear with the pilot's cap, her whole face lit up. "Well, hello there. What a cool teddy bear. What's his name?" Amara looked up at her and for a moment she was back on that other plane, bracing for cruelty, preparing to shrink. But Michelle's eyes held nothing but warmth, nothing but genuine interest, nothing but the simple human kindness that should be everyone's birthright but isn't always given freely. "His name is Captain," Amara said, her voice stronger now. "My daddy gave him to me. He was a pilot just like my daddy was." Michelle's expression softened with understanding. She didn't ask what happened to Amara's father. She could read between the lines. Instead, she knelt down so she was at Amara's eye level, just like Captain Rodriguez had done 2 years ago. "Then Captain deserves the special co-pilot treatment today," Michelle said. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a pair of plastic wings, the kind airlines give to kids to make them feel special, to make flying magical instead of mundane. She pinned the wings carefully onto Captain Bear's chest, right below his pilot's cap. "There. Now he's officially part of the crew." Amara beamed, a smile so wide and genuine that Nicole felt tears spring to her eyes. This was what the world could be. This was what it should be. Not cruelty and suspicion and judgment, but warmth and kindness and the simple recognition of shared humanity. "Thank you," Amara said. "Thank you for flying with us today," Michelle replied. "You two have a wonderful flight." Nicole and Amara made their way to their seats, found their row, settled in. As the plane pushed back from the gate and began to taxi, Amara pressed her face to the window, watching the airport fall away, watching the ground rush past faster and faster until suddenly they were airborne, climbing through clouds, rising toward the sun. She held Captain with his new wings and thought about her father. Thought about everything she'd been through, everything she'd overcome, everything she'd learned. She thought about the people who'd tried to break her and the people who'd helped her rise. She thought about the strange, painful, beautiful journey that had brought her here, to this moment, to this sky. The plane broke through the clouds into brilliant sunshine, and Amara looked out at the endless blue, at the cotton-white clouds stretching to the horizon, at the world spread out below her like a promise. She pressed her hand against the window and smiled. "I see you, Daddy," she whispered. "I see you." And somewhere in that infinite sky, in the space between memory and hope, between grief and grace, between what was and what could be, a father watched his daughter soar. This story is dedicated to the families of fallen service members who carry on with courage and love. It is dedicated to every mother who has had to teach her child that the world will not always be fair, and to every child who has learned that lesson too young. It is dedicated to everyone who has ever been made to feel small because of the color of their skin, the texture of their hair, the circumstances of their birth. And it is dedicated to the ones who stand up. The witnesses who refuse to be silent. The strangers who become allies. The ordinary people who, in extraordinary moments, choose courage over comfort, justice over convenience, love over fear. Because in the end, that's how the world changes. Not through grand gestures or sweeping revolutions, but through small acts of defiance, small moments of solidarity, small choices to see each other's humanity even when it's easier not to. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it made you feel something, then share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story. And the next time you see someone being treated as less than, on a plane, in a store, on the street, remember Amara Washington. Remember Captain Bear. Remember that your voice matters, your witness matters, your choice to stand up or stay silent matters. Because we all have the power to be someone's Mr. Chen, someone's Captain Rodriguez, someone's Tracy who finally finds her voice. The question is, will you use it? If you or someone you know is facing discrimination, resources are available. If you want to support military families, organizations like the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors and the Gary Sinise Foundation do incredible work. Until next time, keep your eyes open, your heart soft, and your voice ready. This is Black Lens. We see you. We hear you. Your story matters.